Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today we actually have to talk about authoritarians because the best weapon they have is control over the internet. And this was a fascinating article by Protocol I think everybody should read. Now, over the last decade, governments worldwide have intentionally shut down the internet at least 850 times. That is crazy, with a whopping 90% of those shutdowns taking place in just the last 5 years alone. Now, these staggering statistics come from a new report released basically today by Access Now and Jigsaw. Jigsaw is a division of Alphabet, they own Google, that focuses on addressing societal threats with technology. Now, this report documents the history of internet shutdowns over the last decade, the economic toll that the shutdowns have taken on these countries that impose them, and what governments and broader businesses and civil society communities can do to actually stop what has fast become a widespread human rights violation. That's right, human rights violation. Now, this report, published in Jigsaw's publication known as The Current, traces the recent basically smattering of internet shutdowns back to the 5-day shutdown of Egypt in 2011. If you remember, that was the Arab Spring and the Muslim Brotherhood, that era as well. The government shut down the internet for 5 days, though the exact data on every shutdown that has ever happened is non-existent, and on smaller scale blackouts had taken place before that, according to the authors. Quote, never before had an entire country, one where more than a quarter of its population was connected to the internet, simply severed itself from the open web. Now, Egypt's shutdown sparked condemnation from some Western countries, but the number of internet blackouts has only expanded since then. These are oftentimes linked to elections in countries around the world, costing the economies of those countries billions of dollars. One estimate cited in a study suggested that Myanmar, that had a string of severe shutdowns, may have basically lost 2.5% of its entire GDP as a result. Now, that's about half the damage wrought by the Great Recession on the United States in less than a third of the time. That is absolutely crazy. Now, the 2011 Egyptian shutdown and others have since drawn attention to the role of the internet service provider and what role they play in countries where very few of them exist. Now, this report mentions, and I quote, in highly developed markets like the United States, where there are thousands of ISPs, the sheer size of the market provides a degree of protection. But in many countries, as in Egypt in 2011, the web can be brought to a shuddering halt with just a few phone calls, meaning if the government runs or can control the ISPs, they can shut them down. Now, Access Now is calling on internet service providers in these countries to resist government pressure to block or throttle internet access and to report the requests they receive. Global companies like Facebook and Google, meanwhile, obviously they're not internet service providers themselves in a lot of countries, they have a role to play in tracking these internet outages and determining whether they are intentional or not. It's this sort of collaboration that also contributes to the rising number that Access Now is seeing. The number of internet shutdowns being counted around the world is rising, in part because now there are people actually doing the counting, whereas before it just wasn't happening. Governments are also paying attention worldwide. A number of global groups, including the United Nations, have condemned internet shutdowns as a violation of basic human rights, and they are absolutely correct. Think about this. We have almost 4 billion, or roughly 4 billion people now, 3.6 as of a few years ago, basically online and interconnected. Entire economies run on the internet. I can't think of a business that I do business with that doesn't have at least a website or easy access to the internet. As I walk in, they're also taking my credit cards. There is so much internet traffic in the world, and for them to intentionally shut that down is a weapon. They're actually weaponizing this. If you recall, there have been several instances in China where China has shut down aspects of the internet or their internet when they're going through, let's say, the holidays of China, or actually when there was an anniversary for the Tiananmen Square massacre and all of that. They shut down the internet to basically quell dissent online and chatter going back and forth from their citizens to essentially smooth over or stop that. These are the things that we're talking about. And when you're talking about basically a group like right now in Afghanistan, the Taliban taking over, they are essentially the government in what was an open society where we were raising an entire generation on Facebook and YouTube and even TikTok and everything else that they had now being shuttered because obviously that doesn't meet their centuries old tradition and mindset. And so now they can shut down the internet or even surveil it because they are going to literally own the capability of the ISPs to operate. Resistance from an ISP is a very difficult thing when the government can simply put you out of business or literally just remove you from power and install whoever they want to run it. And that's what we're seeing here. This is a huge, huge problem that we have worldwide. And as the entire planet essentially struggles with the balance between free and open society versus authoritarianism in any form of on the political spectrum, we have a very serious problem here as we are looking at more countries increasingly becoming more authoritarian in their internet thanks to things like China's Belt and Road Initiative, where the Chinese are actually teaching other countries like Vietnam, for example, how to censor their internet, how to lock it down, how to monitor it, how to create their own great firewalls. This is probably the next massive human rights problem that we are going to have for this century, and it's one of probably a few that are gonna be here. If we don't have free and open internet, if we don't have free and open communication, and the bad that comes with that, meaning misinformation, disinformation, and our abilities to fight that, all is lost. You're not watching this. You're not communicating with me. I'm not communicating with you. And if we are, it's censored, it's monitored, and we're in trouble if we say the wrong thing. That's where a lot of the internet is going, and it's also being shut down when things aren't going the way the government wants. That's a huge, huge problem. Even Russia has disconnected themselves, the entire country, the largest geographical country on the planet, from the internet as tests, basically as essentially a prelude to them having to do this to potentially quell unrest or maybe something they don't like worldwide. It's a huge problem. We need to be in this together. We need to address these things. And hopefully you're living under a government that will respect those rights, whatever those rights are, and not shut you down on a whim. I really hope that's true. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please stay private. Thanks, everyone.